It's time for Around the Ozarks Sports Scene, sponsored by Fast Break Sports and The Pitch. Now here's your host, Scott Puryear.
Welcome in to another edition of Around the Ozarks Sports Scene. I'm Scott Puryear. As always, a big thank you for giving me your time to talk a little sports this week, and we're going to talk some Cardinals baseball. Not the most thrilling or, I guess, friendly topic right now in the Ozarks, but when we talk Cardinals, we like to bring back Rob Raines. He's the owner and author of STLSportspage.com, a Kickapoo graduate. Rob, thanks for joining me today.
My pleasure, Scott. How are you?
I'm doing great, thanks. And of course, you know, it's been over now for you for, about a little over a week and a half. Now comes the off-season fun stories and all that, and the Cardinals didn't waste any time in coming out, the next day and telling you that things are going to stink pretty much for the next year or two, right?
They didn't use that word. I don't remember hearing that word during the news conference. But reset is the word that they chose to use, and it's going to be different. It's going to be interesting, and I think, the problem with trying to figure out what 2025 is going to look like is we really can't, don't have a good way to figure that out yet. I mean, because there's too many variables as far as, who's coming back, who's leaving, who could possibly come in from the outside. So until we get a better look on how the budget's going to be, orchestrated and how much money they're going to have to spend or how much money they're going to have to cut out of the payroll, then we don't really know what to expect. I mean, I think you can, pretty much predict that a lot of the core will be the good young players that we saw some of, this year we saw some of them coming, up through the farm system. That's going to be who they're going to build around, but how they're going to fill in around them and stuff is what I'm curious to see.
Do you think that's one of the things that rankles Cardinal fans more than anything, is even though they had their first sub 3 million attendance in almost 20 years this year, when they talk about budget and what they can spend and all that, when there's so many teams that, the Cardinals in a bad year finished 7th in attendance this year. Mm-hmm. And do you think that bothers fans to hear them talk about, budget woes and we don't know what we can spend this year? Is that part of it?
It may be, but I think that the other thing is we've seen, ever since Bill DeWitt bought this club in 1996, that's been the way they've operated. It's always been just one a business, thing. I mean, he's among, if not the richest owner in baseball. I mean, he's among them, as Tony always used to like to say. So they could spend whatever amount of money they wanted to spend. It's not a question of how, being able to afford it. It's a question of what they choose to afford. And it's always been around, the payroll and expenses and all that kind of stuff have always been pretty much tied to revenues. And I think the biggest concern is, that the attendance is also part of it. I think they predicted that they would have less people this year in the crowd, in the stands, based on how they played in 2023. So I don't think the actual attendance figure was that big of a surprise to them this season. I think the problem in trying to figure out how to, is what to expect next year if, they do drop the payroll and they rely more on young players. How will that affect attendance? And I think then the other part that's going to play into this is the uncertainty of what's happening with the television revenues, with the Bally's contract being so much of a mess because of the bankruptcy proceedings and stuff. So I do think they're going to kind of take a more cautious approach, and I think it's all because of that. So I don't really know if it rankles the fans or not. I've never been one of those people that kind of harped on payroll. I just want to see how well a team plays on the field. I think if you get a good young group of players, playing hard on the field and they're winning, I don't think anybody really cares how much money they make.
Exactly, and there have been so many teams that have done so well with limited payroll. I mean, the Royals this year. You look at the Tampa Bay, pretty much
Detroit,
yes.
Nobody making any money.
Yeah, so it can be done. I think Cardinal fans just want to see it be done, and so you get the most
of it. Yeah. Well, the money part doesn't buy this. Let's just win.
Exactly, yeah. Well, they finished 83-79. They tie for second with the Cubs in the NL Central, 10 games back of Milwaukee. They were 6 games out of the wild card chase. What went wrong with this team this year, in your mind?
They couldn't hit.
Yeah.
They couldn't hit. Their performance with runners in scoring position was dreadful. I mean, just awful. They didn't. They're big players. The Goldschmidts, Arenados, the guys that are supposed to be your cornerstone MVP caliber players were horrible. Arenado got some hits, but he didn't hit for power at all. So I mean, they didn't drive in arounds. I mean, I think what the team leader in RBIs was Burleson with 78.
Yeah.
One guy with 22 home runs, and Goldschmidt led the team with 22 home runs. I mean, they knew their pitching staff was going to be better than it was a year ago, but it wasn't built on this team wasn't built on the pitching staff being, 5 Cy Young candidates. So they knew they were going to have to score runs to win, and they just didn't do it. So, I mean, you've already seen one consequence, the domino of that will turn award, not coming back as the team's hitting coach. But, yeah, I think to me it's all on the players. I mean, they just didn't, for whatever reason, didn't perform. And sometimes, those whole, the hitting with runners in scoring position, there was a time, I remember, when the Cardinals had, hit a 300 team average or something with runners in scoring positions. I don't know how you do that one year and go hit 200, another year. I mean, it's just one of the flukes of baseball, really.
And the hitting coach is always going to be the scapegoat because obviously it's his title. But, I mean, you're right. I mean, guys like Goldschmidt and Arenado who've done it and done it for years, they've always figured out how to figure themselves out, and I don't know, how much a hitting coach can really contribute to that with a guy that's been in the league for years and years and has done it that way. Is it simply the case, you think, with Goldie and getting old? Is that a large part of it? And
I think that's a big part. Yeah, I think that's a big part of it. And I think, it seemed like there was a lot of those games his bat was slow, or the pitch recognition was different. He was, swinging, taking a lot of strikes, swinging at, chasing pitches out of the zone. I mean, yeah, it was a frustrating year for him. Although I will say the last month, 6 weeks, he was, better than he was the rest of the year. So, I mean, he did kind of figure out a little bit there toward the end of the year, what he was doing wrong. Had more success, but by then, of course, it was too late to really help the team do anything.
So a lot of fans, just like they did last year when the football started flying, probably checked out on the Cardinals and missed September and missed the press conference afterward. Kind of summarized the last month of the season for St. Louis, who look like they have some promise, who needs to go in your mind, and then kind of summarize as well the press conference and the reset and kind of what was revealed at that.
Yeah, Walker had a good month of September, so I mean I think that was encouraging to see. Thomas Ajayce, who of course Springfield fans know from being in there last year, he came up and played well, and I think showed that he belongs at this level. And Donovan, and Newbar were both better in September, so I think they've got some guys they can build around. I mean, obviously the future of this club or the future of the winter is going to be determined by what they do with some of their big money guys. I mean, Goldschmidt's a free agent, so their expectations are that he will not return. Can you trade Arenado? Will he be able to accept the deal? Going somewhere. He's got a no trade clause. Him and Sonny Gray and Wilson Contreras all over in that category, all making a lot of money. So they're the guys to watch. I think Helsley, set the saves record for 49. But if you're not going to be a contending club next year, he's a free agent after next year. Is he a guy that you could possibly trade and get a pretty good package of young players in return? That'll be something to watch. Yeah, and the news conference basically was to announce that Chaim Bloom will take over as president of baseball operations after next season. John Mozeliak is going to stay in that job through next season, through this kind of reset period a little bit, if you will. Chaim's responsibilities at the moment is going to be hiring a new director of player development, farm director, to succeed the retiring Gary LaRocque, and then they're going to really try to work on beefing up the personnel and the technology and everything in the minor leagues. So you may see a big part of that coming through Springfield next year as far as what that looks like, and try to rely more on player development and a pipeline of players to kind of produce major league players here for the coming several years. That's the plan anyway.
How and why did they get away from that? Because this was once one of the best farm teams in baseball. And did they just not embrace the technology in that side of it, or where did this thing kind of start going a different direction?
Couple things happened. I think number one, I think some of the other teams passed them as far as that was concerned with the technology. I think some of the coaches that they had were reluctant to use the technology. I do think when COVID happened, they stripped the organization down. They kind of put some money into what they claimed they took money out of the player development system and put it into the major league payroll to try to win, and that obviously didn't work. I mean, they lost a lot of special instructors and roving instructors and coaches and things like that they'd had in the system. They just let them go, obviously, when they didn't play minor league season in 2020 and never got around to replacing them. So I think that was part of it. I still think they got some guys that have produced the farm system. I mean, they got some, number one draft picks and some other guys have come up through the system that have been really, I think, good players. So I don't think the farm system has been terrible. I think it just hasn't produced the impact, all-star MVP type caliber players that they really had, hoped to have, and maybe not the level of depth that they would have liked to have had too.
Tell us about Bloom. I know former bigwig with the Red Sox in his early in his career, and first of all, I guess my other question is on Mo. Why did they? Is this to let him go out on his own terms? One more year, or kind of explain that if you would.
His contract was set to expire after next season, and he had said all along that it was going to be his last contract. He's going to retire, and I think it was just a matter of letting him kind of run with it the whole one more time. And I thought maybe they might go ahead and make that transition now and give him some kind of like a consultant role or advisor role or something for that last year. But I think it's pretty much he's been with DeWitt for a long time, and DeWitt's got a lot of faith in him, even when things haven't worked out as well as everybody would have liked. So not really a surprise that they're going to let him finish out the contract and finish out his career in that job. But what's saying that, I was a little bit surprised they went ahead and already named Hine to take over a year from now. So they will work together, over the course of the year. Mo said at the press conference and when we were talking to him afterwards that obviously if there's any decisions that they make, they're going to affect this team, from a more of a long-term basis. He's going to make sure that ownership and Hine are, on board with it, and they're not going to just do anything he's not going to do anything that they would object to. At least that's what he said at the news conference. So after, I think he's got a good baseball pedigree. He came up in the Tampa Bay system, started out as an intern there, went to Yale, and I think came up through player development there, running their farm system, and I think is a guy's highly regarded. He left Tampa Bay to go to Boston to take over as president of baseball operations. That didn't work out, as well as everybody up there would have liked. But I think you look at the Red Sox farm system now. I mean, it's pretty good. I mean, they've got guys that among the top prospects in baseball. So even though he didn't get a lot of credit and everything, everybody in Boston remembers him for was that he was the guy that traded Mookie Betts. I think he actually did more good in Boston than people give him credit for.
So he's the Jonah Hill character in Moneyball, pretty much, right?
Yeah, I think he understands player development. I don't think he's just an analytics guy. I do think he has, a good opinion of scouts or good opinions of coaching and things like that. So I think he is kind of a hybrid a little bit. He's 41, so he is the younger guy, which I think is going to be good for the system to get some new blood in there. I mean, like Mo said it at the news conference. He said my team's been around me a long time. So I think it is going to be good to kind of see some new blood. I'm really going to be curious to see who he hires as the farm director, and then to see who can come in to be the new people within the system as far as the coaches and instructors and things like that. Because I really think that's going to make a big difference in hopefully how productive the Cardinal farm system is, and with being productive, the farm system being productive, then that will translate hopefully into more success at the big league level.
Any surprise with you at all that Marmol's back? I mean, did you think he was in trouble
at
all?
Not when Mo's back. Yeah, not when Mo's coming back. The only way I thought they would make a change is if they went ahead and made a change at the top. But if Mo was back, you pretty much knew that he was going to be back. And it gives Bloom a chance to watch the big league club more. I mean, he was more focused on the minor league guys last year, I think. So this year he'll obviously get a chance to watch more of the big league team at a more official capacity and make his own evaluations. And then maybe if the team has a bad year, maybe there's a chance to do something different if he wants to bring in his own guy next year. But he had a 2-year contract, so the fact that he's coming back is not really a surprise now.
Can they avoid a bad year next year?
Tell me how good the young players are going to be.
Yeah,
and I'll tell you. I think that's. I like the guy. I like the young talent. I like Walker. I like Gorman. I like Sajasi. I like. I think the pitching is going to be interesting. You saw Quinn Matthews blow through Springfield this summer. Is he going to be ready to take that next step up? McGreevy pitched really well the couple of times they gave him a chance to pitch. So I think they've got talent there. It's just how it all meshes together, and if if some of those older guys elect to stick around and not get traded, even though they know the club may not necessarily be a first place 90-win, 95-win team, I think they could provide some good leadership, and I think it could be a nice, entertaining club. Yeah, I don't think they're going to necessarily be a 60 and 100 season next year just because they're playing with younger players.
They're not the White Sox, is what you're saying, right?
I don't think anybody's the White Sox. The 62 Mets were not the White Sox.
Yeah. Where do you rank Marmol in terms of quality managers? I mean, is he middle of the pack? Is he below middle? In your mind, you've watched a lot of baseball over the years. What do you see?
I see a guy that's okay. I don't think he's anything special, to be honest with you. Mm-hmm. They won, his first year here because he had Poulos and Wainwright and Molina, who were, kind of leading the ship and leading the clubhouse, and got some good years out of a lot of key guys. And then they fell apart the next year when those guys were all gone. So, the truth is probably somewhere in the middle with him. I think he's learned a little bit about the job. Obviously, he's still among the youngest managers, if not the youngest manager in the big leagues. I always thought he would be a manager in the big leagues. He just got there a little quicker than I expected him to do. I say this about any manager. I really always think that when a team wins, a manager gets too much credit, and when a team loses, a manager gets too much blame. So I think that's something that I would put him in that category as too. He's always, a manager's always an easy guy to pin a loss on and say, oh, they cost him the game or whatever, because a lot of times it's not on the manager. I mean, he can make the right move, he can make the right decision about a bullpen guy or a pinch hit guy, and then that player comes out there and tanks. So it's all about performance. If the player doesn't perform, then it doesn't necessarily mean it was the wrong decision by the manager. It just didn't work.
We're all put on this earth as sports fans to second guess. That's what we do.
Sure.
When you go back to last spring or even the off season, what was a move or two that you felt like the Cardinals should have addressed or made that they didn't, and maybe could have avoided this and got them back in the playoffs?
Well, the one thing they couldn't avoid was the Dylan Carlson getting hurt in spring training. Mm-hmm. Next to the last spring training game, he had a really good spring training. Would have opened the year and started as a starting center fielder, and I really think was primed to have a big bounce back season. And then he and Walker collide, and he separates his shoulder or dislocated his shoulder, whatever it was, and he just was lost again. So and then obviously now he's ended up in Tampa Bay. So how much of it? And then that was a trickle down effect, because then you had to start Victor Scott in center, and he wasn't ready. And then when he didn't perform, then he gave Michael Ciani the job, and he's great defensively, but he really struggles to hit. So that was one position that they just never recovered. And then Walker obviously didn't play up to the level of play that he expected to play. So I don't know that it was any one move that they could have made or didn't make. I think because I think I like the moves as far as bringing in the Grays and the Gibson and Lynn. I think they got probably about what they expected to get out of those guys, and they certainly were better off from a pitching standpoint in 24 than they were in 23. So I think those moves by and large were okay. They weren't the sexy moves. They weren't the go out and spend $200 million on a Corbin Burns type guy or something. But I think that they worked if those guys had done what they should have done offensively. And again, how do you predict that Arenado and Goldschmidt are going to play the way that they played this year? You didn't. So that just all added to even a 12-win improvement over where they were in 23, but still not good enough.
When you sign up at Work Money, you could win $50,000. With the average renter paying around $2,100 per month, that means you can have rent covered for a whole year and more. So you can be more. And when you're more, that means you get more. And more. Ooh, but not so much of that. Sign up at Work Money. Get money-saving tips. Skip the rent. Get more rich. Sign up at workmoney.org/more-rich contest for your chance to win $50,000.
The Jordan Walker you watched in September, are you convinced that he's okay now mentally and they haven't completely messed him up with what they've done for basically 2 years? And does he move to first base if Goldie's gone?
I don't think so as far as first base is concerned. I think they're looking at Burleson and maybe even a combination of guys like Contreras and stuff to play there some, depending on what other moves that they make. Baker will be in that mix too. Long term, I don't know that Walker's still a right fielder. I mean, I just don't know. I mean, he's gotten better out there, but he's still below average, I think, as far as the major league caliber outfielder is concerned. His whole ability will be how well he hits. But I don't know the answer to your question. I mean, he seems to be okay mentally. I've talked to him a bunch of times, talked to him in Memphis, a couple of times when he was down there last year, different times. Seems to be handling everything okay. I mean, we still forget because he came up, so he's 22 years old. He's still got a lot of, baseball ahead of him, and he's just got to kind of hopefully get it figured out. And I think he's okay. I don't think they've screwed him up terribly, but we'll see how this next year. I think this next year will be a really, really important year for him.
If you were the front office or Marmol, how would you have handled that differently?
As far as Walker,
yeah. Would you just left him up and let him play, or would you had to send him down?
I would have let him play. I mean, I would have let him play. I mean, to me, that's just, you saw what, I'll give you an example, Jackson Cherio, the Milwaukee rookie, behind the rookie there. The first 2 months last year, he was horrible. He was hitting below 200 and striking out, and everybody thought he was overmatched. And then they kept him playing, and then by the second half of the season, he's right there with Tommy as far as one of the best players in the league. If you look at all his stats, so I think Walker could be that same type of player. And that's what I say. My one concern about the kids playing next year is that if they really will let him play. And maybe they'll have a little bit different attitude if they don't think they're going to be a contending team and be able to withstand some of those slumps. But I'm just really worried and afraid that if they start out with a lot of those young players and then they go, 1 for 30 or 1 for 40 or whatever, will they have a knee-jerk reaction again and do something with them and not let them keep playing? Because that's the only way they're going to get better is by playing. And part of the problem, and this is not just isolated to the Cardinals, but you can talk about it being a baseball problem as too, is they just rush kids to the big leagues so quickly now. Mm-hmm. I mean, I know I've had long conversations with Ryan Ludwig and Matt Carpenter about this. You used to have to get 500 at bats at every level almost to move up to the next level, and all kids just don't do that anymore. They're just like we saw with Walker, we saw with Gorman. I mean, they're all rushed to the big leagues, and by and large, they're not ready when they get here, and then they struggle. And a lot of those guys, it's the first time in their life that they've ever struggled playing the game, and they don't know how to handle it. So, and sometimes they can get through it mentally, sometimes they can't. So it's just, I don't know the solution to that, and I don't think it's a Cardinal problem. I think it's a baseball problem, but I just don't think that they're giving kids enough experience in the minor leagues to be ready to handle that jump to the big leagues. And I think the gap, especially from an offensive standpoint, the gap between AAA and the big leagues is greater than it's ever been.
There's
a lot of reasons for it. There's a lot of reasons for it. Yeah.
Speaking of the struggle bus, is Nolan Gorman salvageable? I mean, what do you see there?
I think so, but there again, I don't know. I didn't get a chance to talk to him after he went down to Memphis, so I'm not sure where he's at mentally too. I mean, he's still a young player. This is obviously a big year for him too. But yeah, he's got to just. I think he's just got to play. I mean, he's going to strike out. That's part of his game. Mm-hmm. But you've got to be able to live with that, and you've got to be able to let him do what he can do, with the offense, with a power standpoint, and hopefully hits, 35 or 40 home runs. And okay, so maybe strike out 200 times, but he's going to be a guy to watch because I don't know where he is mentally right now.
So you mentioned some guys earlier. I'll bring up a name, and you tell me whether they're in St. Louis or gone next season. Goldie.
Gone.
Yeah. Arenado.
Likely to be gone if they can find somebody that will take his contract or how much of it they'll have to eat.
Helsley.
Gone.
Contreras.
Because of the fact, they're not going to be able to pay him what he could make somewhere else. Contreras, maybe. I don't know. I'm on the fence about him.
Yeah. And then Sonny Gray.
Same thing. I think they'd like to keep him, but I also think it's going to be up to him to decide if he wants to go through the rehab, the rebuild or the reset, because he and Contreras both signed here and saying they wanted to be on a team that was going to be a contending club, and if they're going to be okay with not being on a contending club for a couple of years, or would they rather go somewhere else? They both got no trade clauses, so they've got to agree to whatever move they might make there.
For a guy like you that's been doing this for years and years and going to Busch Stadium, what was it like to go this season, especially late, and see more empty seats than you've ever seen? I mean, was it a little eerie? Did you ever think that St. Louis, the air quote best fans in baseball, would vote with their butts and not show up? Kind of summarize that for me.
I actually was glad to see it, because I think it's sending a message to the front office that they can't get away with putting an inferior product on the field. The people are not going to go just to go anymore. Especially at the end of the season. I mean, you're going to get, June, July, August, you're always going to have good crowds because you're always going to get people who are making a trip from Kentucky and Arkansas and Indiana and wherever, that they're coming to watch the weekend of Cardinal baseball, and it really doesn't matter who's playing. It really doesn't matter what the records are. They're going to come. You see all the, parking lots filled with cars without a state license plate. So they've got that built in for them. But then by the time you get school starting and, things like that, you're getting the more local fans, and that's when you're seeing people not show up. So I actually thought it was a good thing for them to maybe realize that we're not going to just be able to roll the ball out on the field and have people show up. We're going to have to, try harder to put a winning team out on the field.
Are there any free agents you can see them going after this winter in particular?
The one thing that Mo said at the news conference, or when we were talking to him afterwards, that the days of signing a free agent, which would have a draft pick attached to it, are probably over. So I don't think any of the premium, free agents that would come with you'd have to give up a draft pick as compensation. I don't think they're going to do that. I think you'd be looking more at fill-in type, reserve type players, signing a 1-year contract to be a backup, kind of Brandon Crawford almost, if you would, just in case Mason Wynn struggles, that kind of role. I could see some people like that, but I don't think somebody anybody major, no.
How do we watch Cardinal baseball next spring and summer?
To be determined. Bally's has said they want to renegotiate the contract with the Cardinals, so we're waiting to see what happens with that. Cardinals have said they're looking at a bunch of in-house options as far as like a streaming direct consumer product where you would pay like a monthly fee just to get access to the games kind of thing. It's going to take over the broadcasting rights for some clubs next year. We were lost in this Bally's thing, so. Yeah, they'll be on somewhere, whether it's an app and a streaming thing or whether it's over-the-air cable kind of thing, I think it's still to be determined.
Do you see this reset as a good thing for, like, say, the AA Springfield Cardinals? I mean, for the fans, is it going to be more entertaining knowing that, more of these guys they may see down the road in St. Louis and not very far down the road? Yeah,
I think so. I think, that especially like at that level, I think if you see – especially if they make some trades, and then if they trade off some of their more veteran players this winter, I think you can obviously get guys that you would have a good chance of seeing at Springfield in the next year or two. So I think that is a good thing. Yeah, I think I'm in favor of it. I mean, as I say, I'm always bullish on the minor leagues. I always like seeing the kids play, and I think there is a lot of talent at that level. I really like J.J. Weatherholt, the Cardinals' number 1 pick in the draft this year. I saw him down in Florida after the draft. One piece about him, I like Quinn Matthews a lot. I still like Tim Kentz a lot, even though I know he has questions about staying healthy. I think Takeo Roby is still a guy that has a lot of big promise. He had a disappointing year this year from an injury standpoint too. Bernal, the catcher that got to Springfield right at the end of the year after Kirk's had a big year at Springfield. So they've got a lot of talent in that farm system, I think, and they just got to be able to. But they've got to be able to get that talent. They've had that before. And then if something happens, as we talked about, with those guys when they get to the St. Louis, they just don't ever perform at the level that you expect them to perform at. So that's what they've got to get figured out. They've got to be able to take that guy that's a really good prospect who's had really good careers and success at the minor league level and be able to see if they can get it transferred into success at the big league level.
Full disclosure to our listeners, we're taping this on Tuesday afternoon. Tomorrow there will be playoff baseball in the state of Missouri. It won't be in St. Louis. It'll be over in Kansas City where the Royals are hosting the Yankees in the division series. Does that make it worse for Cardinal fans, you think, is that the Royals rose to the top back in 15, 16, that era, then sunk to the bottom again, and then now are back at this? What did they do differently that the Cardinals haven't?
Well, they got to get Bobby Witt Jr. in the draft if they were able to build
that
a
helped,
around.
Yeah.
Cardinal fans can still like the Rose. You got Michael Walker there. You got Tommy Pham there. You got Paul DeYoung there. So I mean, there's still a Cardinal influence on that club. I don't think Cardinal fans begrudge Royals fans. I don't. I'm rooting for the Royals. I want to see them beat the Yankees and keep going in the playoffs. It's not like the Cubs. I would have a lot harder time rooting for the Cubs than I do the Royals.
It's kind of like little brother, though, rising up and doing what big brother, hasn't done in a while now. That may be the effect of it. But do you like this Royals team and the way they rebuilt?
Yeah. Oh, I do, and I think it can almost be a model for the Cardinals. I mean, it's hard to believe that you've gone 5 years here. The Cardinals have won one postseason game over the last 5 years, not postseason series game one. They've lost 9 of their last 10 postseason games over that since 2019. So it's getting to be a while, and I think that's something that the fans are noticing, and I think that the club needs to notice it too. And it's I think we can go through this reset, but they better get it right. You better be able to draft well. get some more players coming up through the system here, make some good, smart trades to fill in with the younger players, and just get this thing turned back around. Because the problem is, it's not like they're in the West with the Dodgers and the Padres, a bunch of really good clubs. And the NL Central year in and year out is a very winnable division. The Brewers were a good team, but they weren't a great team. They shouldn't have been 10 games better than both the Cubs and the Cardinals. And they were, and even when Yelich, their best player, was hurt a good portion of the time. So that gap concerns me more than some of the other ones, is that they've got to figure out how the Brewers have gotten to be, that much better than them.
Yeah, the Reds are probably trying to figure some things out too, aren't they? And, of course, you look at the Pirates with that good young pitching with Skeens and Jones. They're it's going to be
there's no fluke. There's no easy wins almost anymore. Just like there used to be too.
Yeah. Well, Rob, before we let you go, tell us about STLSportsPage.com. What do you do during the off season? What can fans find on the website? And I know you've got a newsletter they can sign up for too.
Correct. Yeah, we do a newsletter usually about once a week, which kind of just recaps stuff going on the website and links in case you miss that. We do a podcast. We'll do a regular podcast. I'm doing that with my son Mike, and we're having a good time with that. We usually do that about once a week too, just kind of recapping what's going on with the Cardinals or in the farm system. So we'll just stay on top of all the news. I think there'll be a lot of news with the trades, with the free agents, with the hires in the farm system, from the player development director on down. So be a pretty busy winter. You got the general managers meetings coming up in November. You got the winter meetings in December, and we'll be knocking on the door to the hotel room in Jupiter before long. So it'll go fast, and it's going to be really a fascinating winter, I think, to see what they do.
Very good, Rob. Always appreciate your knowledge and your time. And you got any books in the pipeline now, or what are we doing?
No, not at the moment. I'm actually having knee surgery next week, so I'm going to be on the IL myself for a while here. So we'll try to get through that and do the day-to-day stuff and see where we're after that.
You betcha. Well, best wishes with that. Good luck, and Rob, thanks again.
All right, anytime, Scott. Thanks.
That's going to do it for another edition of Around the Ozarks Sports Scene. Our special thanks to Rob Raines of STLSportsPage.com for his time. I always enjoy talking Cardinals baseball and St. Louis sports with Rob Raines, one of the best in the business. Big thank you to our sponsors, Fast Break Sports. Of course, you're home for all things sports cards, memorabilia, collectibles, doozying up that man cave. They've got it all there at Fast Break Sports. Go see the guys over there and get your needs met for your sports fandom this fall and winter. And then also our new sponsor, The Pitch. Great place to go eat lunch or dinner. Great pizzas, sandwiches, cold beverages, TVs everywhere to watch those sporting events, which leads us into our What to Watch This Weekend, brought to you by The Pitch. These are the things I would recommend you watch on the tube. Catch them over there at The Pitch and have a great meal at the same time. Missouri State football, they are back off the bye week. They're at number 16, Illinois State, on Saturday in Valley Play. That's a noon kickoff. Catch that on ESPN+, one of the streaming networks. Big college football afternoon and evening. You got the Red River rivalry, OU and Texas going at it down in Dallas at the Cotton Bowl. That's a 2:30 kickoff. Texas is the number one ranked team in America right now. Oklahoma kind of hovering in that 15-16 range. One of those that OU, I believe, is Texas is a 2-touchdown favorite. But in that rivalry, you can kind of throw that stuff out because they don't like each other and they play accordingly. And then that evening, Saturday night, catch the Ohio State-Oregon matchup between number 2 and number 3, 6:30 kickoff on ABC. That should be a dandy between two of the more explosive teams in the country. Finally, on Sunday, NFL, kind of a weaker slate this weekend. Chiefs are on a bye. I think the best game of the weekend may be the Detroit Lions at the Dallas Cowboys. That's a 3:25 p.m. kick. You can catch that one on Fox TV. That should be fun to see those two offensive go at it. And finally, let's go Royals. They, like we mentioned in the podcast there, they've done a great job of rebounding from the doldrums of the last few years. Bobby Witt Jr. is special. Salvi, Vinny Pasquantino. They got a lot of young guys to root for there. Royals and Yankees continuing their series. Hopefully it goes on through the weekend and KC advances there. So good luck to the Royals. That's going to do it. We'll see you next week on Around the Ozarks Sports Scene.
At your job,
Do you ever have to deal with a nose roller? How about a snub pulley? Well, if you're installing a new conveyor belt system, dealing with the different components can sound like you're speaking a foreign language. Luckily, you've got a team ready to help. Grainger's technical product specialists are fluent in maintenance, repair, and operations. So whenever you want to talk shop, just reach out. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.